million people to contain the coronavirus outbreak. The unprecedented move follows another spike in deaths from the virus despite a strict quarantine imposed in the north. A ban on public gatherings now applies to all regions, and people would only be allowed to travel for work or family emergencies. Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte is urging all citizens to stay at home. Now, concern over the outbreak sent stocks plummeting on global markets on Monday. Billions were wiped off the value of major companies. Key indices in the U.S. plunged as much as 6% as trading closed. The White House has confirmed also that the president was on Air Force One with a congressman who is now in self-quarantine. And a cruise ship that's been forced to stay off the coast of California has just been allowed to dock in Oakland. Now, more and more countries are adopting restrictive measures to stop the virus from spreading. Israel has become the first country to enforce a mandatory 2-week quarantine for all new arrivals. The decision applies to both citizens and tourists. Victoria Gittimby reports on the situation across
Italy's coronavirus epidemic, already the second most deadly after China, has taken another dramatic turn. With more than 60 million people, the country's entire population under lockdown from Tuesday. Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte says he's extending restrictions on movement after another spike in deaths from the coronavirus. All public gatherings are banned and schools and universities closed until April the 3rd.
There will no longer be a red zone. There will no longer be a zone 1 and zone 2 in the country. There will only be Italy, a protected zone. So across the whole peninsula, people should avoid all movement, unless they are for 3 specific reasons: for work, emergencies, or health reasons.
16 million people in the north of the country have been under lockdown since Sunday. Riots in 24 prisons across the country followed restrictions on face-to-face visits. In Modena, 6 inmates died after they broke into the prison infirmary and overdosed on stocks of the heroin substitute methadone.
As a warning, they posted some posters which say we can only go inside wearing a mask. They're only allowing visits of 1 family member at a time.
This was a hint of what chaos might ensue if the virus were to enter the confines of the prison system. It is almost everywhere else in Italy. These were rare scenes filmed inside a hospital in the northern town of Cremona. And also on lockdown, the financial capital Milan, one of the engines of the economy. Europe's major stock markets from Milan to Frankfurt, Paris and London all suffered dramatic falls on Monday, with share prices plummeting as the infection rate soars. The economic impact of the coronavirus is already substantial and will only grow. There are discomforting comparisons being made to the 2008 financial crisis, with concerns for the preparedness of European banks and businesses. On Tuesday, EU leaders will meet to try to come up with a unified response, but they won't meet here in person in Brussels with its steadily growing infection rate. Instead, they'll be holding a teleconference. The circumstances of this unique crisis continue to evolve, although not yet into a pandemic, says the World Health Organization, in which transmission of the virus is uncontrolled.
Now that the virus has a foothold in so many countries, the threat of a pandemic has become very real. But it would be the first pandemic in history that could be controlled.
There are signs of success against the virus in China, South Korea and Singapore, but not yet in Europe. Spain looks set to launch what's being described as shock therapy measures, possibly following France and Germany with school closures and restricted public gatherings. These are moves the government in Britain is not yet prepared to make, keen apparently to defer the enormous social and economic costs of fighting the coronavirus. But there will likely be no avoiding them.
You don't see that is the current situation now. You don't see So how do you curtail these measures? How the government say maybe they behave? Some of them don't know. So you still need to be enlightened. You still need to know how to, react, how to, so that you know go enter one chance. So Must trial
Yeah,
again.
this is no doubt a critical time for Italy. The red zone being extended to the rest of the country now. How exactly are they going to enforce this?
Well, they're going to enforce it with the police authorities, of course, and everybody who's moving around will be asked for what reason they're moving around, and they can only move around because this decree effectively is called you must stay home. So if you do move around, you need to have a valid reason for doing so. Either you're going to work, or there is some sort of an emergency, or it is for health reasons. So you just can't leave the home for any reason or to go out and have fun. In addition, of course, the Prime Minister has extended the closure of bars and restaurants, not only in the north of Italy and, you know, from until 6 p.m., but now it's across the whole country. So there's not going to be much to do after 6 p.m. anywhere in the country because there will be nowhere to go. Discos will be closed, pubs will be closed, gyms are being closed. There is also going to be no more sporting events in the country, at least until April 3rd. And of course, all schools and universities will also be closed initially now until April 3rd. And then we shall have to see whether this will be extended or what will happen after that.
Yeah, and so how are people, Sabrina, coping with these restrictions, and have they accepted that life is going to change for them?
Well, I think a lot of people are very frustrated because it's going to be very complicated for families. Not everybody lives in the same place. Many people are being separated. Of course, the Prime Minister has said that the transport in cities will be unchanged. So people will be able to get to work if they have to using public transport. But what we will be seeing is what we've been seeing in the north of the country until now. Basically empty cities, empty bars, empty streets, no one in shops, except if it's absolutely unavoidable, basically if you're going to buy food. And people that are keeping, at least a meter apart from everybody else. The restaurants and bars have also organized themselves so that you can sit at a table and be 1 meter apart from someone else. In addition, of course, the government has on television constantly these videos explaining how you should be behaving, washing your hands, wearing surgical masks, not sneezing in front of somebody, but using tissues that are disposable. So the country is really having to adopt a completely different and new way, unprecedented, let's say, way of living.
Indeed.
You don't see him. So that is how it is now. You don't just have to move anyhow. Or like they outside, they checkmate everybody. I just say make I can't tell us briefly, may we know. There are other informations that we follow up shortly after this very news. So stay tuned. Those are